And if people here, as we do, really care about the kids, that we need to help them take back their freedom so they can grow up in a free country. And if there are students, please, I would hope there'd be people here from the campus media, but I'd particularly like to have questions from the students, input from you, suggestions. We have just a few minutes before we get you out of here, not being too late for 4:20. There's a microphone. Okay, kids, come on up.
Surely someone has a question.
It will be.
Yes, sir, ma'am.
There's a student.
Yes, Don.
I actually have a question for Paul and a question for Anne. And Paul, since you seem to get the kind of calls for these scare stories that you've been describing, and as you talked about mentioning to reporters, like, can I see the study? No, I'm sorry, the study, blah, blah. Have you tried describing the scam to those reporters and trying to convince them not to be scammed?
Sure. Is this on? Is this on? Yeah, I've got an interesting story about that, and it relates to the psychosis story that came out of Lancet. Time magazine called about it, and they wanted me to comment on it. And I said, at this point I actually had a copy of the study, and I could have done a point-by-point sort of rebuttal that I had sort of presented to you. I said, this is not really a study, it's a meta-analysis. 40% really doesn't mean much. We talk about less than 1% worldwide cases, things of that nature. But I said, you really can't report on this story without looking at the context. I said, the context is Britain just has a new prime minister. He wants to reclassify marijuana as a Class B drug. And this whole notion of marijuana makes you crazy is in the paradigm of getting the administration to support that. And I said, we can really tell this by the fact that 3 times, I believe in the last 4 or 5 years, this nonpartisan British Advisory Committee had looked at the same data and had, as I put on the slide, found that there really was nothing to it. And I said, if you're going to really report on the story, you have to report on this political context. And he said, my job's just to write about this particular study. So talking about previous studies that found something different, talking about putting it in the light of what was going on politically, and I've had this response quite a bit from reporters. Bruce may have encountered it too. They said, I don't care about any of that. I'm writing about this study. And that's all they want to talk about for that particular story.
So you've never given one of them the presentation you gave us that says, did you notice that the story is embargoed? Did you notice, blah, blah, blah?
Oh, sure,
Can't you tell you're being scammed here? Just write the story next Monday when actually...
But I've had that discussion with a Bloomberg once, and they said, well, our competitors are releasing the story. They're in a battle to get it out. If the story, for instance, the one I was talking about that's coming out on a Friday, Bloomberg had that story. They called me the Friday before. The study didn't appear till Tuesday. They actually held it for a couple of days. They were the first to call about it. They were writing it over the weekend. And I said, when are you going to release it? And they said, Monday or Tuesday. And then other reporters followed suit. And by Monday night, that story was in circulation. And they were afraid they were going to get scooped by their own reporters. Nobody was going to wait for that story to come out.
My question for Anne is, I've seen an awful lot of terrible quotes in such stories from the movement. I've seen Paul quoted as saying truly horrible things about initiatives or programs or news stories or whatever. As someone who tries to quote people in context, can you try to educate the crowd a little about how not to be quoted out of context?
Be really careful about what you say. Know that everything you say to a reporter will be on the record, no matter what they say to you. Be very, very careful about every single word that goes out of your mouth. If the reporter doesn't quote somebody in the blogosphere will, If you feel like you've been misquoted, get in touch with the reporter immediately and demand that either they print a correction or a retraction or a letter to the editor. And make sure and frame your quotes so that they are always within context. Make sure your quotes are bomb-proof. And I would further recommend that you do scenario training with people within your organization or focus group. Somebody play the hostile reporter and you play the person giving the quote, and have them throw really hostile questions your way and practice staying in context and making yourself clear.
If I could just add one thing to that. I would heartily endorse everything Ann just said, but also add, say the things you want to say, make the points you want to make as briefly as you can, then shut the hell up. If you keep talking, you increase the chance they'll use something that you didn't really want to get across.
No idle chatter with the press.
You got it.
I've had the experience of NORML and subsequently talking to reporters, be interviewed by a reporter, and it's quite clear that the reporter got it, that they really were on our side. And yet, when the story appeared, it was something else again entirely. And I have had people call me and say, "That's not the way I wrote it." So there are times when the fact is what we would call the editocracy will simply deliberately change and garble the story. And then again, I have been also massively misquoted as saying the opposite of what I said.
Thank you. As being part of the media myself, doing my Amnesty International radio show, I was very interested in what you brought to the table there. And I see quite a varied array of the types of media in front of me. And the question that you posed to the audience was quite a little bit disturbing, is that there's no media out here. Okay, so I'd encourage you all to become part of the media. It gives you access, right? So, challenges to you to next time this is around, more people will raise their hands. So, what words of encouragement would you give to this audience to become part of the media and utilize the various sources like yourself?
Well, something I'll bring up, and this is coming up in the breakout session that I'll be doing, has to do with leveraging the use of the internet for media. Anybody with a handy cam and a YouTube account is now the media. Viral videos sometimes get a bigger response than anything that goes out on any of the big media networks out there. So, like the Jello Biafra, become the media. That's my suggestion.
Well, and in fact, we really are. I think that we have become a part of it. The question is that how do we help them deal with the institutional deficiencies of the old media? And I think that's really our focus.
I would add something to that. If you are going to go out there in the blogosphere or on the internet or in public and make strongly partisan comments, and that would include becoming a member of NORML, you probably won't get a job in the mainstream media. Just be aware of that. Now, you might be a good blogger, and you might get a job in the alternative press, but you won't get a job in the mainstream media because they'll perceive you as already biased.
On the other hand, if you go to work for the DEA.
That's biased too.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Sir?
Ms. Harrison, I was especially intrigued by your discussion of getting data. I'm trying to make this as brief as possible. In Portland, where I'm from, we have a thing called City Club, and one of the functions of City Club is to do major studies of civic issues. Since we meet on Fridays for lunch, it's called Liberals with Good Table Manners. Anyway, I tried to get the club to do a study of what it was costing the state of Oregon, Portland, Multnomah County, it's costing to run the war on drugs. And by just making phone calls to the police bureau, I talked to several different officers. They gave, each one might give me a different figure on a piece of something. For instance, the Drug and Vice Division budget is $4,600,000 some dollars. They have 30 of 35 officers in that division working on nothing but drug cases, and that gives you $3,900 and some dollars of the budget goes just to drugs. Doing that sort of thing, I figured out that the city was spending $14,329,000 for the Drug and Vice Division and arrests and booking